you've founded a lot of companies, including Odwalla. And most recently, you founded and you're leading a company called Califia Farms, which is linked to what I think is your personal mission to catalyze change in the mainstream food system. So what inspired you to create Califia Farms?
Hello? Good morning, everybody. Well, first off, I thanks for that really too kind introduction. I really want to thank Deb and the whole SVN crew for creating such an incredible energy around the organization, and I think Deb's been really instrumental in that. So I haven't been here for 5 or 6 years, and it's really apparent to me. So I'm really proud of you, Tim. It's awesome.
Thank you so much.
Gonna try to avoid the questions as long as possible.
Good job so far.
You know, I want to roll back because a few people asked me, they said, Greg, you know, I know you think when you're talking to your friends, they all heard it all before, and in fact, Peter Strugatz told me, he said, Greg, what do you have to say? So I think that was a sort of pep talk for, you know, getting me to think a little harder about what I was going to share. You know, to be brutally honest about what gets me going and inspired is I really think the food system in particular, but, you know, I'm really talking about business in general. You know, it should be run by human beings and instead of, you know, sociopathic technocrats. And, you know, so that gets me going, you know. And so I like to get in there and, you know, duke it out with Dean Foods and, you know, big, you know, the usual suspects. But that's not really that enlightened of an approach, really, I guess, because, you know, it kind of says there's an us and a them and all that. So I want to answer Deb's question directly because she said, you know, you've done all these other stuff. What inspired you? So it's kind of like, why get back into it? And besides, you know, you got to be some kind of glutton for punishment for one thing, or else you have to be just compulsive. And so I know I'm not compulsive, so I think that the real answer is that, you know, like all of you here, I know we share a lot of core values that we just feel the sense of urgency for the planet in terms of what we want for our children and our children's children and on down through the generations. And so there's not, if you have some capacity and you know, at your disposal, then it's time to put it to use. And in fact, it just seems to me, and I'll tell you my qualifications for making this statement. I went to a famous astrologist in Santa Cruz, and we have really good ones there, because that's a real specialty of Santa Cruz, I'm telling you. Like, everyone's an astrologist. And so the guy, you know, he read this guy was supposed to be the esoteric of the esoteric, deep, literally a guy way back and then in some hut way back in Bonnie Doon in a tree, you know, and stuff. And he said, okay, you know, he kind of read the runes there, and he goes, well, Greg, you know, all I can say is you have some kind of bizarre thing in your chart that just, you are like attached to the moment of the, I forgot how he put it, but you're connected to the times in a really unique way. And so I just thought about that, and I go, well, my timing's pretty bad most of the time. You know, it's like too early. I felt like I just missed the 60s, and, you know, that was really like poor timing, late to that one. And I always, so I was kind of left into the implementation phase. You know, the 60s, all the stuff got out there, all the fun was happening, and then there was nothing left but to do it. And, you know, so it's like a major source of frustration, not inspiration. So I'm going to roll it back just a little bit to, you know, really for Califia Farms, that was, you know, I've had some experiences, and so I felt like I should jump in at maybe a middle phase. So I partnered with these farmers that are pretty big growers. It's a co-op, but don't think groovy co-op. I mean, these guys are, you know, they're hard-nosed businessmen. They run a lot of acreage in the Central Valley of California. It's big business for them. But they didn't really know what to do with their byproducts and all that stuff. And so they called me. And, you know, some misguided search firm, you know, submitted my name. And I wore my cowboy boots to the meeting and, you know, ended up, you know, there was obviously a process, but got the job to, you know, see if I could make brands for them that they owned, you know. And even though they were bigger farmers and it wasn't organic, I really felt like, you know, to create a narrative where the farmers have the value chain all the way to the consumer was the first step in instilling the values that are related to the land. Because these guys were not venture capital. They're extreme risk takers. I mean, farmers are some of the best risk managers I've ever met. It's amazing how much risk they'll take. But the fact of connecting end products that are typically ephemeral and can be bought and sold by various players, but instead connecting it back to these guys have never sold a single piece of land in their co-op, ever. And, you know, they have 30 to 40,000 acres now. Never sold a single piece. And the property values during the time they've held it have, you know, quadrupled probably. So that's a certain set of values. Then we don't see eye to eye about, you know, certain pesticides, or, you know, they can't quite trust organic yet, but, you know, it'll come. And so I thought diving in with those guys, and then as long as I had the freedom to create things and innovate things, then, you know, I would be happy. So rolling it back to what inspires, you know, I really wanted to talk to this group and be upfront about, you know, business. I'm a business person. I mean, really, it's boring. Every day it's like spreadsheets, and, you know, it's some of the most grinding stuff all the time. And at the same time, I came to business from being a musician, from being inspired by improvisation. I was a real huge fan of the avant-garde, and through my friends in the arts and so on, I heard about, there was a famous sculptor named Joseph Beuys. And Joseph Beuys coined this term called social sculpture. And the idea was that culture was plastic, and artists could not create objects, but could create ideas and things that actually were living cultural artifacts and creations that changed the way society functioned and the values of society. And I thought, well, if artists, you know, if that's what artists do, why can't businesses be social sculptures? And that kind of concept really turned me on, because I was an improviser, and I was, you know, the people, I mean, in addition to the merry pranksters and, you know, the people that came out of the 60s and early 70s, my biggest inspirations were, you know, Miles Davis in his late period, not Kind of Blue, but, you know, like Agartha and, you know, electronic stuff. So it was that evolution, being inspired by artists who evolved constantly. And when you really look at the best artists and filmmakers, they were always surrounding themselves by young, talented people and, you know, playing the rhythms and the feelings that were happening, that were coming up, being channeled by the young people. And they were putting them into structures and forms. And that idea in business is something that I really try to implement, and to really marry innovation coupled with systems and locking those things into a culture that everybody participates in. So Odwalla was inspired like that. We were a group of people who played music together, and one day, you know, I read this account that you can't, you know, you can't know. There's a point at which knowledge becomes useless if you're not doing it, you know, in your own evolution. And that next day, I bought a box of oranges and a little hand squeezer and squeezed the first box, and the next day we squeezed 2 boxes, and the next day it was 4 boxes, and you know, and it was like that till we were working 24/7. And because we were started by this group of artists and musicians, those values just impregnated Odwalla. We did, you know, we weren't thinking we were imposing values on a business. We were just acting up, you know, our values, acting them out. But it was just crazy work, you know. And so pretty soon the reality of how much work it was became a very interesting factor, and the idea of eliminating fatigue became a really motivating factor. So we became highly technological in the company because there was so much physical labor that was kind of punishing that we were always motivated to try to automate and so on. And that's kind of curiosity around the technology evolved into the company being one of the first companies that employed handheld computers and all of that stuff. And when that happened, it was very interesting because we were living in, you know, close to the Bay Area in technology, and we were sending juice to Steve Jobs, and we were in that whole milieu. And the idea of creating jobs that were empowered jobs, we had this opportunity because we had route trucks and we had handheld computers, and we had very bright people who were, you know, from UC Santa Cruz and from San Francisco, and, you know, we had the we had a pretty diverse, I'll put it this way, we had a pretty diverse employment scheme, and we had so many trucks out there that to manage it by conventional means would have been just a nightmare. So we motivated and inspired people by giving them their own entrepreneurship with their routes. And there was a period of time there where our drivers were making more than the, you know, most of the middle managers in the company. And we had drivers who were making $90,000 a year just driving a little, you know, a route. And they were building those routes themselves, and they had the tools to do it because they had the feedback systems, the information loop, and all of that. And that was something I was really, really proud of. And you know, to this day, I think we have over 20 CEOs that were graduates of Odwalla's, you know, program there, and running a lot of really cool natural food companies. And more than that, the managers of our Hispanic, you know, production team, now one of them, the first guy that we really had, and they were all from one family. I mean, the Hernandez family, all the cousins, I mean, it was just one big family, really, in the end. But they ended up opening up a chain of Latino supermarkets. And that was, you know, really as a result of being inspired by their experiences. And that was really cool, too. That was really satisfying to see. So those were some of the early inspirations, Deb.
Thank you. So you started as a musician and an artist, and you've had a pretty unusual, unconventional approach to business. And I know you did a lot of risky things and unconventional things at Odwalla. So what was just one of the riskiest things that you did at Odwalla, and what resulted from that?
Well, like, riskiest to who?
Take your pick. Just one.
Well, I'll tell a funny thing first. But, you know, one of our route drivers was stocking the shelf, and there was a guy that came into the store and was quite rude and told him to move his truck. And so the guy just kept being rude, and the driver should have just jumped up and moved his truck, but instead he opened up a bottle of Mango Tango and dumped it on the guy. And and he was a lawyer. So that was one of the riskier things that was done. But one more kind of funny story, which is totally true, but all these are true. I'm not embellishing them whatsoever. I accidentally turned a hose of juice that was pumping, you know, fresh squeezed orange juice into a tank and turned it on a group of Bank of America executives that were, and literally soaked them to the bone. It was an accident, I swear, but you know.
Did you get the money?
It's a passive aggressive act. No.
What a shocker.
No way. Never heard back either. No, I mean, the riskiest thing I ever did was bring an investment banker in to invest in the company. That's the truth.
I've got to follow up on that. So Odwalla was eventually sold to Coke after you left Odwalla, and we all know Ben & Jerry's was sold to Unilever, and Stonyfield Farm was sold to Groupe Danone. So a lot of entrepreneurs out here, and as they're thinking about raising capital and they're thinking about ownership issues, what advice do you have for them based on your experience at Odwalla?
Well, this is a kind of a setup question, because Deb knows I'm pretty passionate about this, and for all of you, I have a real point of view that us entrepreneurs don't think nearly enough about the decision of who you get in bed with the money. I just think we way underthink. I mean, you think about when you start up and your partners, there's a good chance you put some real thought into, okay, am I going to, you know, do I want to be partners with this person or not? And then when it comes time to go get the money, you just want the money, right? And you're so happy that somebody believes in you that you take the money. It's crazy. I mean, I really don't think, I think that's just completely lopsided. I just think there's way, way, way not enough attention paid to thoroughly thinking through and vetting and really doing your homework on who's the money. And no matter what, as soon as the money comes in, I don't care if it's the best person, the destiny is changed. And you just got to make sure that that's what you want. And that's what you're prepared to do. Because the challenges, you know, the challenges of scale, and I think one of the nice things about the evolution of SVN is just, you know, it doesn't feel like it's the race to be cooler than the other company that was just up here. It doesn't feel like it's a race to get bigger, you know, for the most part. But there's all kinds of joys and rewards and effects because of the way the world is wired together now by doing something really well at any number of scales rather than, you know, just thinking you've got to get big to, you know, to make an impact. And yeah, I'm hypocritical about that. on one level, you can say, because I chose to interact on a larger scale. But I'm also 58 years old, and I, know how some things work. So if I just, I mean, I could be pretty happy at a juice bar, I'll tell you, because that's probably when I'm the most joyous, is like, everybody knows I'm having fun being the mixologist. But that's not really probably, and I'd go crazy also if that's all I did, because I see so much stuff that should be done some other way. I mean, for example, we're just launching a new product that's Califia Farm makes specialty citrus products from California, and that's where Califia came from. The name Califia is based on the goddess who was the inspiration for the land of California. And of course, the Spaniards were lusting after Califia, both, she was this fantasy figure that drove them to, want to dominate this tribe of Amazons. That was the quote myth. But also, they had a lot of gold. And so that was the story. So a lot of people don't know that the origin of California is this incredible Amazonian goddess. And so I thought, man, that's up for grabs. We can talk about that. So just like Odwalla was a mythic figure that was invented by the Art Ensemble of Chicago that led the people of the sun through the gray haze, and that was the source of inspiration for the name Odwalla. So anyway, I have an affinity for vowels and stuff, and but the need for having companies that express spirit is, I think, one of the critical elements, and that having even this business and writer guy this guy wrote about 25 books, almost annoying. Who is it? Tom Peters, right. Tom Peters lived in Palo Alto, and one day he called and he said, hey, Greg, I'm drinking one of your juices right now, and I'm loving it. And he goes, you know what I like best about it? And I said, I have no idea. And he said, on the stamp, that you have to put the code date on there, you say, enjoy by. And he goes, I love that. And I go, what do you like about that? And he goes, because you're talking to me. And, I was thinking about it, and I go, yeah, that's exactly right. That was the whole point. It was like, it's so obvious. Somebody's going to drink something. It's a person. They're drinking it. It's their bottle. It's in their hand. It's for them. And that whole thing about thinking all the way through to the enjoyment and the complete synesthesia. It's like you can't do testing, for example, with taste panels, blind, you have 10 cups, and then you put that same stuff of the thing they didn't like on cup number 5, you put it in a bottle with a bunch of other stuff on it, and people love it. Because it's like everything synthesizes into this other message, that nourishes them in some other way. Now, I want to put the real good stuff in there, and the example I was going to of why, be involved at a larger level for me right now is that we're making almond milk. And, there's a lot of people who are interested in plant-based diets nowadays, and the big dairies, they didn't want to touch plant-based milks. Why, it's not until the consumer is demanding these things, they finally, give it to them. So there's this lag time between where I feel the people are and where the systems and the industry wants things to be. I mean, the oil company is the obvious worst example of all time, but in the food business, we want products. I mean, there's this incredible opportunity and demand right now that I've never seen before, because the combination of social media plus where people are at, in the, in their ideas about self-health and rebuilding themselves. So the only myth isn't just to own a house and make more money than your neighbor and go to the next level. Now, health is wealth is a concept that people can actually grasp. And that's, that's really, I think, incredible. I try to tell, like I was talking to Janie last night from Mama Chia about the opportunities. I've never seen so much opportunity in natural products, right, as ever. It's massive. And you think it's big now, it's not even, it's, Odwalla, I mean, we thought I've been making smoothies for 30 years. I mean, more than 30 years. 32 years, 33 years, 34 years. And people in the certain parts of the country are just discovering smoothies. They're just now figuring out, I mean, it's unbelievable. So you just think there's the fastest growing SKU in the premium juice section is the green drinks. And 18 years ago, I introduced the green drink superfood to our board of directors. We were a publicly held company. They didn't, it was one of the riskier things because I said, I'm doing it anyway. You guys can do whatever you want with me. I'm putting this thing out there. It's still the #1 selling SKU for Odwalla. Yeah.
Good for you. So you put a lot of thought into the customer experience when you were at Odwalla and now, and you also put a lot of thought into the employee experience. And one of the things you did at Odwalla is you created and co-created a really strong set of values and a really healthy company culture, which helped you get through a significant crisis that involved an E. coli outbreak at Odwalla. So can you talk about that experience and what you learned from it?
Well, this is a little tough because SVN did a similar conversation when it happened in 1996. I think I came in 1997, and so some of you may have been here when I talked about that. And we were a raw juice company, and huge believers that was, the healthiest possible thing that you could make. And we ended up having the, suspicion of an E. coli infestation. And we had a decision to make. We were called by the Department of Health, and they said, well, we have 6 or 7 people that are ill with intestinal disorder, and they say that, they all had your product. And so what do you want to do about it? And so we got together, the management team, and we talked about it, and we said, well, let's go on TV and let's tell everybody not to drink the juice, and let's organize our route system and pull all the stuff off the shelf tomorrow. And so we did that, and the lawyers weren't real happy about it. But we eventually got them on board. But the thing was that we had a set of core values that were really explicit, and we had a very integrated program at that point in the company's history. So the first core value was honesty, integrity, and respect. And if the analysis was pretty simple, if there was a chance, and if it could be true that the juice really could have gotten E. coli in it, then there wasn't anything else to do. I mean, thinking about the future of the company was ridiculous because, particularly because if people thought it was a healthy product for children, and children were the ones that were most at risk if they got E. coli. So to me, it was really, I mean, business schools and case studies and all that, but to me, there really wasn't, much of a choice. It was, you know, it was a very obvious thing to do, and I think everybody felt that way, and, you know, but it was pretty disastrous, and it does tie, actually, Deb, to the, you know, question about investment, because when the company, a lot of people think I sold Odwalla. I didn't want to sell it, in truth, and after the E. coli, we had to get investment. I tried to get investors from this community, and back in those days, this community really didn't have the same set of resources it does today. And so we had to turn to hard money from, you know, pretty, not bad people, but people who were in the beer industry. I mean, they were, you know, they wanted to turn around in a couple of years if we recovered, but they took a lot of risk. Howard Schultz, we were talking to Howard Schultz and some of the more enlightened investors at the time too, and they didn't want any part of it. And these guys took a chance, and they were able to, you know, double or triple their money in a few years. And I don't blame them for that, because we knew what we were getting into. But I really didn't want to sell it. And they, you know, so as soon as we recovered, they went about looking for a partner. But just so the record's straight, they didn't find Coke, and Coke didn't find them. It was a woman who was the wife of an executive at Minute Maid, who in the South, and she said, "Honey, there's a product in the shelf that you got to take a look at." And she had gone into one of the first Whole Foods stores that had opened in the South. Yeah, I think it was Atlanta, because they were Coke people. And she pointed out this big Odwalla cooler that was in that store. And Errol's here. I don't know. When did you guys open up in Atlanta, Errol? Oh, so it must not have been Atlanta. Yeah, maybe. So anyway, the truth is, it was, you know, this vision in Whole Foods of what Odwalla was in that milieu that, you know, she said, "You better, you know, get on that." And the guy, to his credit, and his name really was Sugar Man. I kid you not, you know. And that's why people say, "Greg, why are you still in the juice business?" And I go, "I keep running into this stuff, you know. I can't get away from it." So.
All right, last question for you is, last year you had a near-death experience that involved an emergency liver transplant. And we were all scared for you. You must have been terrified, and you too. And we're so happy that you're doing really well and back here with us. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and if it's changed your perspective at all?
Well, okay, Deb. Moment of truth here. And you guys might have to bear with me. I think, you know, I trying to keep it on a lighter note so I could have enough momentum to get through this part of it. I mean, one thing, I was working too much. And part of what I wanted to talk about today is just, you know, there's a truth to entrepreneurial, social change, compulsion, and drive, you know. And it's not the healthiest balance. And it is a, you know, I do feel it's, there's other traumas. You know, I'm kind of like, the cheap psychotherapy is your conscience. So, you know, I feel like I had a drive, you know, and maybe I know some of the roots of it, maybe I don't. But the truth is that my liver condition was not caused by stress or overwork. It turned out, after they pulled the liver out, they saw what it was. So it was a congenital deformity of my bile duct system. And ironically, my dad was a heavy drinker. I mean, a real heavy drinker. A nice drunk, but he could put away a quart every day. And he never had a liver problem. And I'm the juice guy, you know, and I get the thing. So what's fair about that? So but really I didn't take as much care of myself as I should have. And I really, there's a guy named Arnie Mindell, I don't want to steal his line, but he said, well, you can just say the body is the language of the soul. So when you get, you know, when you take when your soul has to like fucking tear down the house to get a message across, then, you know, what can you say? So that's kind of the way I looked at it. And so I was talking to Joe the other day, and he goes, well, Greg, what'd you learn? I mean, what do you get, you know, what's the message? And, but I can't talk about the message unless I talk about the process. So the thing is that it was a very intense thing that had some dimensions to it that I can't escape, really. I mean, liver disease is, I don't want to really go into it, but it's pretty nasty. I just kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and I really didn't know how bad it was. And in fact, the advice that I had from Stanford wasn't really the very best, and they didn't even have me on the transplant list. And then, you know, I got a second opinion, and I mentioned these details just because if any of you, the medical system here, God bless it, and it saved my life. But had I just relied on who I thought was really smart, I'd be dead. And it was literally because we got some other perspectives that I'm here. And so Dominique and I, when we found out how serious it was, we moved to Memphis. And there's a place there, same place Steve Jobs had his transplant. And we just moved there. And like, we weren't there more than a couple of weeks when it failed. My liver literally failed. And it was we happened to actually be in the hospital when it happened. I'd gone in for a blood test, and then, you know, all hell broke loose. And the trouble with it was that they didn't have my blood test results back yet, and they couldn't give me any anesthesia, and they couldn't do the blood transfusions, and I was hemorrhaging. So there was a point where Dominique, God bless her, she was there, and I said, just go outside. And, you know, a lot of people here have probably had a near-death thing, you know. And it's not, you know, I didn't get any whole insight, but there's a point where there's just like a door kind of opens and it's an option. And, you know, it's just kind of like you feel it, and it's an invitation if you want to, if you want to go on out. And the choice of staying for my particular circumstances is, you know, was kind of like a lot of hurt. So I thought about it for a minute, and then I thought about Dominique out there, and Dominique was just all of my family and just people who love you. And I didn't want to let them down, you know. So there was just kind of like no choice. It was like, I go, oh God, you know, okay. And so, like when you recover, and in fact, the doctors kind of rubbed it in. They said, Greg, you know, not only did you survive, but you know what? A liver showed up within 12 hours that was your size, your blood type, and everything about it was perfect, and it showed up in 12 hours. That never happens. That never happens. And so they basically like read me the riot act. You better do something worthwhile. So I don't know what that is yet, but
if
that's
you've
what I
got
got.
any ideas, let him know. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much.
There was one thing that I forgot to just touch on that I wanted to end with was Dominique and I use this phrase together and in our family a lot, and we're really pleased to see that our children are now adopting their own way to embody it. And we just kind of put it as the power of intent. And, just if you don't let it turn into an American business book with the same idea repeated 50 times in every single chapter, but it's one idea, and just really work with it. It's such an amazing practice, really. And that, when I reflected back, I realized that I really didn't hit what happened to me, at that point, and in all of these crisis things. And I felt like sharing more joy with you guys rather than trauma, but it's really the intention. And even looking back on Odwalla, which I think is being run so poorly at this point by Coke, but I look at what it's reached, and I have people even today tell me, God, thank God for superfood in an airport. It's just like, I go, okay, so if you think about the intention that all of you have created, even this morning in the room, and we just embody, if we do that intention, the world is completely different. Completely different, and it's so powerful, and it really is the secret practice. So thank you guys for indulging me this morning. It was really fun.
Thank you so much, Greg. So good having you back. Aww.